Hello. I am sometimes very happy I have this private reader channel where I can just yak about stuff that I have no expectation anyone is ever going to watch me, because boy, this is a book where you probably don't need some dude weighing in on, but I can weigh in on it to my heart's content. I can kind of work my way through this book, which is um a mixture of romantasy and feminine rage against all the mistreatment, misogyny, violence that has been done against women in its time. And this is not me saying that. That is the author's note at the beginning of this book, a romantasy fantasy by Trc Lvnsllr, a U.S. author. This was published in 2025. It is apparently the first in, I think it's a duology, the Wrath and Fury duology. And um, I I think I'm going to argue that this is one of these books where maybe romantasy and female rage against the horrible misogyny of the world maybe wasn't the greatest mix. That unfortunately these two very worthy pursuits kind of nuke each other. Yes, this is a fantasy world in where there is one country amongst all the kind of patriarchal, ye old fantasy male dominated countries. There is one country where it is a country run by women for women's advantage. 500 years ago, a queen asked for the goddess gift and was given great physical power, but only great physical power over men. And this was something that was passed on to all the other women, maybe just the noble, all the women, the noble women of this country, so that they would have power against men. Only men. They're not just superpowered in general. It's not like Wonder Woman, like she can pick up a car or anything like that, but she could pick up a guy and just toss him like a bag of things. So it's a complete role reversal where this isn't a utopian matriarchal society, everyone's getting along. No, this is what happens if pissed off women were put in charge and they decided to just basically do what men had done to women all this time. Men are seen as sex objects, they're slaves, they don't have legal standing. This is maybe the one thing is that there's actually a legal concept of rape in this society. There is the main female character of this book explains to the male character who's from a different country, there is this thing called rape, and he's like, what's rape? And rape is when and then explains that to him, and then shows the punishment, which is a dick guillotine. So it's a pretty hardcore that way. The female villain in this book is perfectly happy to abuse and beat men for her own pleasure. And it does seem to be a sadistic pleasure of how she gets off. So this is very much supposed to be just like, look, I'm holding a mirror up, but to get it through to you, I'm going to show women doing it and how terrible and horrible that is. So that actually has the makings of, I think if it was maybe a feminist fantasy, that would be kind of an interesting thing. It's interesting when you introduce the romantasy to this. In this book, our main female character is Olira. She is a queen potential, and apparently she needs a noble husband, but there was a uprising about a decade or so ago where basically the male nobles of this country tried to stage a revolt and were all killed for it. So there's no males of suitable marrying age. So she has gone off husband hunting. But this is just literally hunting. And so she's captured a eldest son. She doesn't know it's an eldest son from the Brutes. We're not going too subtle here. The Brutes kingdom that is next door, where it's run by a very misogynistic, violent, sadistic King Attalus, who takes out his violence and his paranoia on his sons. Llyra thinks she is capturing a younger son, but no, it turns out that she accidentally captures Sanos, who keeps his identity as the eldest son hidden to protect his brother, and takes him back. And he becomes a kind of an entry point of education on this society where, men aren't allowed to. If you if a guy draws blood on a woman, he is instantly killed. This is, scenario that of course comes up in this book. And so we have these two characters, but I think it's because it is a romantasy that we're supposed to like both of these characters. So of course Llyra is like, oh, she lives in the society, but of course she wants to change things. She thinks that, like, yes, while men are terrible in all the countries around, women should treat men better here. They should be more like equals and stuff like that. So she's not completely bought into the premise of her country. And Sanos, on his side, he lives in a misogynist society, but of course he's the one tender-hearted guy who's like, oh, now that I understand this idea of rape, that's terrible. That's an awful thing. Let's just explain to him. And they're both noble and good people. So it kind of guts that kind of fiery feminist premise of this is a violent female society where they treat women like men are treated in theirs, because it's a romantasy and we have to have two likable characters at the front of it. Maybe it's like, well, could you just have Llyra be the likable one and Sanos being much more kind of misogynistic? But no, you can't have that, because then why would Llyra lower herself to love the guy if he wasn't also just a super swell, wonderful guy? So that kind of nukes it that way. And I mean, there's also the other thing of, like, it's a romantasy. You're expecting spicy love scenes. You're expecting it to be kind of fun. You're thinking, the guys are all, I've been kidnapped. Oh, as a guy, he's like, oh, I've been kidnapped. Or oh boy, I get to kidnap a guy and tie him up and have my way with him in a kind of a fantasy in a different kind, the sexual fantasy kind of way, role-playing thing. And maybe it's going to be a bit kinky, but because it's that's where you kind of, like, in a kind of a pure romantasy book, spicy romantasy book, that would be the case. But in this one, you have two protagonists who have to be kind of bastions of, I would never do anything. Like, there's kind of comedic thing of, like, okay, you kidnapped this guy, but once she gets him into the bedroom, she's like, well, of course, I have to get your full consent for any sexual activity. I would never, ever take advantage of you, which is just like, you've already violated his consent by kidnapping him and, having him all scrubbed up and beautified, and you're going to marry him against his will. But no, when it comes to, we're suddenly in an apartment, and these are two modern characters, and it's like, of course I have to get consent, which of course, yes, in the real world you do, but there's a thing of going into kind of a romantasy book where you're expecting kind of hotness. It's like, oh, this is so wrong, but I still need to do it. And it's kind of like expressing it, but that conflicts with the whole kind of feminist kind of angle here. So it's like, it's not kinky and hot enough, yet it's not kind of feminist enough. It doesn't kind of go to the kind of the extremes that someone like I think of someone like Joanna Russ or someone like that would go to in a book like this, where you would have very unlikable characters on both sides, but they would just like, okay, if we're going to go to it, we're going to go right to the wall. I was going to say balls to the wall or something like that. So it doesn't have that kind of an edge, but it also doesn't have the kind of, like, these characters are boring. They refuse to have, quote unquote, kind of sexual fantasy fun. So it doesn't doesn't kind of get you on that side. So it's an interesting failure is what I would call it. It's not hardcore enough to be a kind of a feminist kind of takedown, but it's also not perverted enough to be kind of kinky and hot in a kind of a guilty pleasure sort of way. It's boring that way, and it's gutless that way, which is pretty harsh, which is probably why I'm never sharing this video outside of my own little private reader. My little private reader castle where I can huddle in my little office and vent and stuff like that. But yeah, it's good to get it off my chest at least. I'm not the one to deliver this message, so whatever. All right, I have been Jay. More videos later.